we sort of lead with like, you'll probably lose all your money. I think it's a harder climate than ever for new musicals. I think it's a scary time for new musicals. This is Black Diamond theater making.
Hi friends, welcome to Game Changers, your backstage pass to the innovators transforming Broadway. I am Katharine Quinn, and today we're here with Greg Nobile of Seaview Productions. Welcome.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us. I'm so excited you're here.
Oh my God, I'm so happy to be here.
I feel like you're literally the busiest man in showbiz.
No, we're all busy. It's show business.
But it's not a competition, but if it were, you would be winning. You would win. What represents you on Broadway at this moment?
We have the forthcoming George Clooney helmed Good Night and Good Luck, Nick Jonas and Adrian Warren in the last 5 years. I think that's it.
I kind of feel like there's like a 50-50 chance that on any given day you're going to announce your next Broadway production. So I would say there's actually a 100% chance that between the time that we record this and it debuts that you've announced at least one, probably two.
Hopefully not two, but maybe one.
I bet two.
We'll see.
I'm going to bet two. We should start at the beginning. So like, okay, where did you grow up? Were you always a theater kid? Did you perform? What did you think you were going to be when you grew up?
I thought I wanted to be a performer from a young age, like so many of us who have found our way to the other side of the business. I grew up like singing and dancing and putting on shows with my best friend in our childhood home and
community theater, school
school theater,
star roles,
all the things, supporting.
Okay, like?
Supporting the Pirate King in The Pirates of Penzance.
Excellent.
Raoul, Phantom of the Opera.
Wow, okay.
But never, never the leading man.
Never Phantom.
But that was like never the Phantom.
Okay.
My best friend was the Phantom.
Oh, yeah.
It was tough, but we got through it.
Secondaries are most fun, though.
Yeah, character actor.
Yeah.
Got to bring a little
personality.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the most part.
Exactly. I thought I wanted to be a performer for a very long time. I very fortunately wised up to that idea being a bad idea relatively early.
Okay.
Like in high school.
Okay.
I was sort of like, this was fun in Brantford, Connecticut, where I'm from, but that was sort of going to be the end of the journey for me. Grew
up coming to New York, seeing shows?
Yes.
Do you know the first show you saw on Broadway?
Yeah, so it was Jekyll and Hyde, which was, I really don't have one of these storybook like moments of like we came to see The Lion King and it was incredible. And we saw Jekyll and Hyde and my mom had bought a package where like, because the Jekyll and Hyde Cafe was open at the time.
Oh my God. I did not know that was a thing.
Yes, it was like an immersive, this is like a early aughts, like immersive restaurant experience thing. And I had to leave Jekyll and Hyde screaming, crying because it was so terrifying.
Oh God.
But because we had purchased the add-on lunch thing, we had to go. And then they reprise all the scary moments from the show in the restaurant. And it was traumatizing.
No.
I shouldn't be working in the theater.
That's insane.
Yeah. And then I went to Ragtime and I cried again.
How old were you?
I was young. I mean, I can't remember. I was young. Too young for seeing those shows.
Wow.
It wasn't my mom's fault. She tried, but she chose the wrong shows.
Yeah, clearly.
But more importantly, I grew up going to the theater with my grandfather, who was a typewriter salesman for IBM in New Haven, and took my grandmother to all the world premiere musicals that came through New Haven, which of course at the time was where shows would try out. So all the Rodgers and Hammerstein musicals. He went to, and when she passed, I became his theater buddy. And while the shows weren't coming through New Haven anymore, the Goodspeed Opera House was like a huge place for him and our family. And he had season tickets. And so I grew up on like under Michael Price's direction of that building at the time, grew up on these golden age musical revivals happening at Goodspeed. And at some point around the same time, I learned that there was this amorphous job called producing that was on the business side of the art. And
you're in high school at this time.
When I was giving up my performing dreams, I was learning about this. Yeah, when I was hanging up my
hat, your dancing shoes,
my dancing, yeah, exactly. I was learning about this side of the business and just loved it from the first time I sort of heard about it.
So what does that mean to a high schooler? Because I didn't know what producing was until like last year.
Yeah.
So as a high schooler, I had outside of Mel Brooks' musical, like I had no concept of what that meant. And I feel like I'm still discovering the different versions of what that means. Yeah. So in high school, what was your understanding of what a producer was? And how did you learn?
Yeah. The aforementioned best friend who used to get all the lead parts in the shows.
The Phantom.
The Phantom. Ryan, shout out, we used to do shows at recess. And then the recess shows would morph into a backyard performing group that we had called the Lemonade Gang. Which was a group of neighborhood kids that we put together every summer, and we would put on shows to raise money for a nonprofit organization called the Myelin Project, which supported the research for a disease called adrenoleukodystrophy, which was a rare disorder that was affecting one of our childhood friends at the time. And Ryan was responsible for making sure that everybody would sing and dance in the right line, and he was like the natural born performer. And I was responsible for making sure my aunt like gave us $5 to come in, and that I printed the programs, and that, you know, we put the ads in the newspaper. And from a really young age, I was producing and he was performing and leading in that way, but didn't know that there was a job or a title for that. And at some point learned that there was this job called producing. And I was like, wait a minute, I think it's that thing that we were doing over here with the Lemonade Gang, you know. And it's so interesting. Like, I remember having a general meeting at the Long Wharf Theater, where my mom like drove me in to like meet with, was Eric Ting, who at the time was the associate artistic director of the theater. And he said, you know, making professional theater is just like you're doing at the Lemonade Gang. It's just more zeros. You're still calling your friend to hang the lights. You're still calling your friend to be in the show. You're still calling your friend to do the social. Social wasn't a thing then. Yeah. But if it was, you would have been doing it for the Lemonade Gang. Would have been amazing. It
would have been so great.
But Texas. It's so true. And it's so true. And that idea of like the producer's responsibility of bringing people together around this idea of getting something on, you know, was sort of what I had been doing from a really young age, just didn't know what it was.
In college, you pursued what?
I went to school for a few weeks at Marymount Manhattan College to study arts administration, but mostly I just needed a one-way ticket to New York, which is what my college admission was. And once I got to New York, I started working immediately and dropped out of school. And
what did that mean, started working immediately?
I odd jobbed all through. Again, this is actually just a podcast about Ryan Blomquist, because the aforementioned Ryan Blomquist had moved to New York.
Tell me he's starring in a Broadway show. Where is he?
He's at Spotco. He's starring at Spotco.
I'm dead.
Yeah.
Wait, Ryan Blomquist?
Yeah.
I didn't know this.
Yeah. My oldest and dearest friend.
This is blowing my mind. I love him.
My grandfather, the aforementioned grandfather, and his grandfather sold typewriters together at IBM. My mom was his mom's babysitter.
What?
Yeah. Crazy.
I know him so independently of you, and I had literally no idea that's who you were talking about.
Yeah.
Ryan and I worked together on The Great Gatsby. Wild.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So anyway, he was at Tisch. We shared a studio apartment for 3.5 years.
Oh my God, where?
On 45th and 11th Avenue.
Wow. In the thick of it, kind of, but 11th.
Far.
Yeah, but adjacent to the thick of it.
Adjacent. And I was working as an assistant, and I was actually working in social media at Situation Interactive.
Oh my God.
I was liking Facebook posts for Wicked, the musical.
Oh my God. What year is this?
12 years ago. Okay. I graduated in 2011. From
you and Ryan were the same year?
Yes. Yeah. So I started working immediately, odd jobbing, assisting. I was a talent agent's assistant. I was a writer's assistant. I walked dogs. I sold suits at Bloomingdale's, sort of like whatever it took to like scrape together, which at the time was a very low basis because we were sharing a studio apartment and we had no expenses.
That's wild. Okay, so how did you get from that to producing half of the things that are currently on Broadway? What happened?
I went to an amazing program called the Commercial Theater Institute, which just was announced that it's coming back.
I didn't know that.
Yes, which is it's an amazing program. It is run through TDF and the Broadway League, and it teaches theater producing. And I went to this amazing 3-day course. It's a total crash course about producing. It like totally solidified in my brain that like being a theater producer is what I wanted to do. And one of the things that they taught at CTI as a way to sort of get your feet wet was to go and be a co-producer on things and get to meet people and sort of get in a process. And being a co-producer means that you raise money for someone else's. There's sort of a lead producer who's in charge of all the day-to-day, and then there's a group of co-producers who support the show, who I sort of now consider it like a show's board of directors, although that's not the official capacity of a co-producer, but fundamentally it is. And they were like, go find a show to co-produce, and that will be a way that you can sort of get to meet people and build an investor base and things like that. And I was a talent agent's assistant at the time, and she was representing an amazing designer named Linda Cho, who was working on a musical out of town at the Hartford Stage, which was not so far away from New Haven, Connecticut, where this all started, on a musical called A Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder. And I went to go see A Gentleman's Guide at Hartford Stage. Joey Parnes and John and Sue Wagner and Johnson were the lead producers of it. Completely fell in love with this brand new musical. What I know now about the theater is like it had everything going against it. At the time, I didn't know that. And I just fell in love with what the show was and what the idea of it was. And you know, I felt like I could, you know, maybe put some dollars together. I really believed in the show and that I could have a life. And I joined as a co-producer on that show. And that was my first ever project. At the time, I was 21.
How did you have the confidence at 21 years old to be like, no problem, I'm going to raise X amount of dollars, which I imagine is not a tiny amount.
Yeah.
Like, how did that happen?
I do think that I thought of this recently when I was, I'm not a skier, but I was on a ski trip not too long ago.
An important disclaimer.
Yeah. Okay. I just want everyone to know I'm not a skier. But I went to ski school last year.
Okay, cool.
And it was me and a lot of like 3-year-olds and 5-year-olds.
On the bunny slope.
Literally on the bunny slope. And it was like a terrifying scene. Mostly for me. Totally humbling. But you watch these little kids fall down and it's like nothing. But if I fall down, I get hurt. now, right? And then I can't go to work, and then I can't this, and then I can't make that event. I can't, like, there are consequences,
right? Because
I'm taller and bigger and whatever now. But I was watching these kids, and I actually had this, like, I never really learned how to ski despite my attendance at ski school, but I really did have this, like, life moment where I was like, oh, right, when you're smaller, what if that literally means smaller, or just like in life or in the journey, you just don't think about, like, you take these bigger swings, you have different risks. Like, what I needed to cover, you know, again, like, basis wise was like a couple $100 a month, you know what I mean? So at the time now, I'm like, would I have taken the same swing? Would I have had the sort of bullishness to just like go for it? Probably not. And I feel like the youthful aspect of how I got started was a real helpful piece, because I was sort of like, well, what's the worst that can happen?
That's amazing.
And I do remember at the time I had this 1989 Toyota Camry. That was like it was eggplant purple. I called it Ruby.
Nice.
It was the only thing I owned, you know, and it was like a couple $1,000s at the whatever yard. I was having a hard time raising the money for this show, and I had signed a piece of paper that said I was going to raise this money. And then I was like, they're going to take my car. I was like, they're going to come and take my car, which is not a thing that actually happens, nor would they want my car, nor would that have helped the enormous problem I had with
But that was the consequence in your brain.
In my brain, I was like, well, my car's gone. And I'm going to go to Broadway jail.
But you got to keep Ruby.
Yeah.
Did you raise all the money?
I did.
How much are you allowed to say?
It was $125,000 or $150, something like that.
Listen, for a 21-year-old, actually for anybody, that's a lot of money to raise.
It was. It was a
daunting, family, friends? Like, what are you doing?
So it actually all comes back to the Lemonade Gang and Brantford. And, you know, Ryan and I had raised a lot of money philanthropically to support this charity that we were running. And so there was a lot of people who had been supporting the nonprofit over the years. And, you know, what CTI had taught me was this idea of how you can approach people with, you know, investing in Broadway is an opportunity, right? It's not, you're not asking for favors. And I had spent so many years with Ryan raising money philanthropically, which you are begging people to support, and they're never getting their money back.
Yeah.
And CTI sort of taught me that there was a way to pivot the ask,
pitch,
and invite people to be part of this community. So, you know, all of the people who supported my first couple shows were all people from the Brantford community who had, you know, been supporting the Lemonade Gang all those years, which was great and full circle.
I absolutely hear you that investing is an opportunity, and also it's a crazy time. How do you handle the inherent risks when you were talking to potential investors? Like, how do you talk about it?
Yeah, we talk with full honesty about what it is. You know, we sort of lead with like, you'll probably lose all your money, which, by the way, doesn't happen all that
Just
often,
most
but
of the time.
It does happen. It's part of it.
Yeah.
But you know, for us, it's about genuine transparency from day one, from like the first conversation about the show all the way through the process. It's sharing all the information you can, making sure that people are fully on the ride and have all the same information that you do. And obviously you try to be really honest about the risk profile of anything, you know, like having a huge star in a play for a limited amount of weeks and whatever is a safer bet than putting on a brand new musical that has no IP basis and no stars and no whatever. And what we've found is that we've developed, you know, real trust and, you know, a two-way street with our investors who expect us to be honest with them about, you know, what the opportunity looks like and what the risk profile is. And then it's up to the investor to sort of choose what their tolerance for risk is. Can
you speak to the distance between starting as a co-producer and then lead producer / Seaview? How did all of this happen?
Yeah, co-producing was the first stop. You know, I immediately caught the bug right after that. I was like, what's the next one? What's the next one? And went on to co-produce a few shows after that. I knew that lead producing was the end game, but I also knew that there was so much to learn from other people. And what's amazing, I found in my experiences of being a co-producer, is I co-produced for a lot of different lead producers. So I watched a lot of different processes unfold, and you have different sort of levels of exposure in different processes.
Yeah.
So sometimes you sort of didn't see anything, and sometimes you saw totally everything. And it's totally up to the lead producer on how they choose to engage with their co-producing community. You know, and co-producing was a really helpful way for me to develop a base of initial investors who, you know, getting access to deal flow and bringing opportunities forward, while at the same time beginning to develop relationships with artists who I loved and starting to work downtown and off-Broadway in a lead producing capacity. You know, I was really fortunate that through a series of situations, all the lead producing shows that I worked on just got bigger. Like in time, it was sort of perfect. You know, Lempicka, which is a huge musical I worked on for a decade, was supposed to be the first thing I lead produced.
Wow.
And I'm so fortunate that that's not how it went. It ended up being like the 6th or 7th thing that I was the lead producer on. And it took all of those experiences from working on the Bangson's 100 Days, which was this like tiny little capsule of a beautiful musical that started out under the Radar Festival and then went to New York Theater Workshop, then went on tour, to doing the Sweeney Todd revival at Barrow Street, which was, the whole thing cost $1.5 million and it was really small and it ran for a while and it was successful, but like got to see that version of it, and then worked on Seawall Life Uptown, which was a 2-hander, 10 weeks only at the Hudson Theater, which was a first step as a lead Broadway producer, but there was 4 other lead producers who I was really close with. That was my first. And then Slave Play was the first thing we were sort of really in charge of as the primary lead producer, and that was a slightly bigger show. So by the time we got to Lempicka, I was actually felt that I was ready to meet that moment, as opposed to having come in with this big $20 million musical sort of out of the gate. So, the journey from co-producing, which is still something we do, a bit of, to lead producing and developing our own stuff, was sort of a really gradual.
How many people are at Seaview?
There's 6 of us.
That is very small for the number of productions you're on.
6 very busy people.
Yeah, how do you do that? I literally don't know how you do. That's wild. Do you lean on general management a lot?
Yeah, we work with outside partners, and we typically have other lead producing partners on our shows too. Yeah. We just prefer to work in partnership. So, we're great collaborators. It's sort of at the core of what the business was set up to do. So we lean on other folks. We work really hard. We have a super dedicated team. We all sort of share the burden.
You worked on Lempicka for a decade. Yeah. Where did your involvement start?
I was the writer's assistant.
I did not know this.
I was Matt Gould's assistant.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I used to get Matt sandwiches. I mean, I would still get Matt sandwiches. Matt and his partner were writing a musical called Whitney's Uganda, which won the Richard Rodgers Award as soon as I got to New York. And I on a whim, went to go see a reading at Columbia of this musical called Whitney's Uganda. I went because Diane Paulus was directing it, and the topic sounded interesting. I knew nothing about it, and I absolutely fell in love with this musical, and I met the guys. I wrote to them Facebook Messenger or whatever.
Yes.
And we met at Amy's Bread.
Oh my God.
And I was like, I have to be involved with your writing. I was so moved by it. And they were like, we don't really have that much money, but we can give you this. And if you can come and help us and you could be around. And it was the greatest gift ever, because I got to watch Diane Paulus make an original musical. We went to Boston and stayed in Cambridge for
And wait,
what
your involvement in this at this time is?
The assistant to the writers. And I was in the room every day, as you know, what that process is. And to watch a musical being made was like the most eye-opening experience I could have ever made. And at the time, Matt Gould and another one of his writing partners, Carson Chrysler, were commissioned by the Yale Rep to write a musical based on the life of Tamara de Lempicka. And they wrote the song, the end of Act 1 finale, Woman Is. And, I remember when they turned the song in, and I was like sending files around or whatever. And I called Matt and I was like, I have to be involved in this musical. I'm like completely captivated. And they were effectively, like lovingly, but effectively like, you're our assistant. What do you mean you're going to produce the show?
Right.
Yeah. I always say it was like stone soup. I was like, well, can I just put a reading on? And then, we put a reading on, and Amanda Greenfield came to see it, who was running the Williamstown Theater Festival, and she had agreed to, give the show a production. I said, well, can I just help raise some money for the production at Williamstown? And then, there was another step and another step. And
were you co-producing at this time?
Yes.
Okay.
Just beginning to begin in that world, but there was sort of no credits to speak of. But just, these things genuinely take a decade.
Yeah.
And, I was really fortunate that, my career journey and the show's journey sort of met at a place. And I remember one of the agents for one of the writers calling me, and they were like, I guess you're producing this now? And I was like, great.
That's right.
I've been here a while. I've stuck around long enough.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay, so Lempicka ran for
a couple weeks.
A period of time.
Yes.
It was incredibly audacious and beloved.
Yeah.
What is the climate that we are in for new musical theater?
Hard. Yeah. It's really hard. New musical theater is the hardest. I would say that I'm making a lot of skating references for someone who doesn't know how to skate. But I did feel like, and I said this a lot in the process, I was like, this is Black Diamond theater making. You know what I mean? Like, this is the hardest for every department. Everybody has it hard. They are impossible to crack, new musicals. They take forever.
Yeah.
They're hugely expensive to make. The development periods are very long. The risk is super high. And, mostly they're just very expensive to run. And if you don't find that audience quickly, it's tough to sustain.
Yeah.
And I think it's a harder climate than ever for new musicals. I think it's a scary time for new musicals. I also think it's the core of what we do, and it's the core of the art form, and it is vitally important to the health of the street and to the artists who work here and everybody around the business, and also it couldn't be a harder time to make them. I still believe we are in a climate where you can be successful in new musicals. It's just getting harder and harder.
Is there anything you would have done differently or a different model you would have tried?
Yeah, we began building the show in a pre-pandemic landscape. We made lots of choices for the life of the show based on that circumstance. And life after the pandemic, is it after the pandemic? We're still who knows? It's just much different. I don't know exactly what we would have done differently. We could probably say lots of things, but I think at the time we made the right choices at the right time for that show and where it was in its journey.
Certainly with the knowledge that you had at that time.
For sure. And at the end of the day, I love what those artists put on stage, and I stand behind what they put on stage. And I adored it, and I watched it 60 times. And I think it was a beautiful piece of writing, an important piece of writing. And perhaps we're all going to see the revival at City Center in 20 years. And
we are much kinder to revivals.
Yeah.
So I think there's totally that possibility.
We're working on a production in Korea.
Love. I was going to ask, like, what's the...
Like, there's still a life for the show, certainly. And I think that's one of the amazing things about new musicals is, there are so many tentacles.
It's not just Broadway.
For sure. And so we're pursuing all of them, and we have very enthusiastic producers in Korea. And
when is Korea, do you know?
It's going to be 2027.
Sick.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Come on through.
I want to go to Korea. Have you been?
No, never.
I'm dying to go.
See you there.
I know.
It's going to be great.
I want to experience that musical theater scene. It seems that you found a formula that works right now. It seems like we've got, like as you mentioned earlier, star power, limited run, typically known IP, financial success, which feels like can be a far cry from Lempicka, Bangson's, different vibes. And it seems that you are, as the best producers are, an incredible marriage of artistic integrity and businessman. So is that a result of the times? Is that the only model that works? Is it the only model you're interested in? Like, can you speak to that a bit?
Yeah. To be really clear, if I could spend all day making new musicals, that's all we would do. Like, this business was, as I said, like, came from a glimmer of the eye at the Goodspeed Opera House being like, I want to, and listening to 42nd Street and like burning out CDs and all the things. After the Lempicka experience, it was important to me and to the business that we created opportunities for our investors that could be net positive experiences. And so we are in a particularly star-driven moment because I feel like it is my fiduciary responsibility to those who have take risk with us to also see reward. And so we have a very sort of star-focused year. I also do believe that we are in a moment where everything is about creating events and eventizing. And we also talk about, like, a donut shop opening in New York needs to be an event. Yep. Nothing can sort of just like
be there.
Yeah,
and Broadway is not its own advertisement anymore.
It's not.
Yeah.
And so we have found a model, that works with putting really exciting people in really exciting pieces of work. I hope that the things that these great, amazing, talented actors choose to do excite the community artistically. We certainly feel like, when you are working with people like Sam Gold and Dan Ocken and Rich Chavkin and all these people who are behind these projects, like, there's a tremendous amount of artistic integrity behind them. And also they are commercially viable projects that, can generate meaningful returns for investors who then, when I come to them inevitably in a year or two from now and say, we have a big swing idea, that they are prepared to step up to the plate with us and join us on something like that. For as many star-driven, eventy things we're doing, we're also moving a stereophonic to Broadway, which is a big swing in its own way.
A hit.
Non-star-driven, non-IP-based material that was a huge hit off-Broadway and then moved in with a great group of producing partners to Broadway last season. So there's definitely room in the market for non-star-driven work, and it's important to us that we balance our creative portfolio with projects that are that and also ones that are swings.
Diplomatic and said with integrity. We love it. It's a near impossible time for new original musicals and new original work. Stereophonic was like an incredible success. It does seem that, like, you've done this too with the Lortel. It feels like there is a model for people seeing the show in New York, generating word of mouth before it's on Broadway, and driving a demand for Broadway, so that word of mouth has started previously. Because it seems as though when people are opening new musicals cold on Broadway, it's like you have to make up for so much time of like learning the brand. And, you know, it's just like, it's an impossible task, especially in the noise of 2024, 2025. Is the New York method a thing? Is touring like The Wiz or Six and then being on Broadway? Like, what are models that we should be exploring that we haven't been exploring?
Yeah, it feels like we're cracking the model wide open now, which is really exciting. Commercial off-Broadway is a really viable place for shows to start or just stay. The producers behind Wiz were really smart about building that model where it toured hugely successfully across the country and then came in as effectively a tour stop, but they plussed it up for Broadway, and then it's going to go back on the road and has done great and, you know, brought so many amazing audiences to that building, which is big, and it was like amazing. But it had come in with already being a hit on the road. And so it feels like we are in a time where people are really thinking about, you know, their relationships to not-for-profit producers. We're thinking about our relationship with the road. We're thinking about our relationship with London, where it is more cost-effective to produce. And it feels like everybody's a little bit like, all cards on the table, like what's the best path for this show, and what are the various avenues that we can think about doing it that might look a little different. And that's what's exciting to us at the moment. It feels like there's no one way to do anything anymore.
What is something that you've seen on Broadway recently that really excited you that you did not work on?
Oh, Mary. I love Oh, Mary so much. And it was also started down at the Lortel, a space we love deeply. It was a total event downtown. They moved it to the Lyceum in the middle of the summer. Cole is extraordinary and is the core of the show. I think everyone was a little bit like, what's this going to do uptown? Certainly those lead producers who are very smart had an idea about what it was going to do, but I think it, you know, completely wowed the business. And, you know, it is this like left of center, really downtown event that, you know, is absolutely shattering box office records at the Lyceum. And, you know, it's so important that we get those shows that come in and it turns everybody's head and people will start to think, well,
Broadway can be that too.
Yeah, for sure. And it's attracting new audiences. It's like a who's who in there. Every time there's like celebrities everywhere. They've all come out of the woodwork. It's like every piece of marketing they put out is so smart. And I think it's been such an important like cultural touchstone. And all of a sudden people say, well, shows can transfer from off-Broadway, or, you know, shows like this can do, or original comedies can do, right? And all of a sudden it just takes one. And then everyone starts to be like, well, what if we do something like Oh, Mary, which is like the best possible thing for the business.
I also don't know that you mentioned Romeo and Juliet in the beginning.
I didn't.
So that was the one.
That was the one.
That was the one. I haven't seen it yet, but I can't wait to.
It's on 51st Street, so it's, you know,
it's
further up.
Yeah.
When you go through the theaters.
Do you have a claw machine?
We do.
In the lobby?
We do.
That's genius.
You got to come play. It's fun.
An event.
Yeah.
So you have a claw machine at Circle in the Square. Is that because it's at Circle in the Square? Like, could you have done that in a traditional Broadway space?
Totally.
You think?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's some of the more traditional playhouses just have less front of house space. If you're out the Broadway, for example, there's lots of space.
Yeah.
And, you know, we find that the theater owners are mostly really game to support sort of big ideas and big swings.
Love that.
And whatever. And Circle in the Square in particular, because it's a Broadway theater, but it's a bit non-traditional in its format. They're totally wide open for you to be like, what do you want to do? You have to put it back together at the end. You can't leave a nightclub in the basement of Circle in the Square. We will have to restore it. But as long as there's a path to restoring it, they're so wide open. And the team at Circle in the Square is just extraordinary. It is the last independently owned Broadway theater.
Wow.
Which is amazing. It's run by Paul Libin, who's an absolute icon of the theater, and run by Susan Frankel and Cheryl Dennis. And they are just, yes. It's pretty extraordinary.
That's amazing.
And we're like, what if we brought this claw machine? And what if we painted all the walls black? And what if we put this big teddy bear thing? They're like, great.
Love that.
And it's attracted a whole new audience. We have sort of more new to file audience members at that show than almost any show this season. And, you know, they have embraced the fact that we're finding new audiences, and the way that we talk to those audiences, both outside of the building and inside of the building, just has to be different. And they have completely embraced that.
To that end, do you think intentionally within your portfolio about like, this is a good show for young people, this is a good show for these, like, are you intentional about like evening out the pie, or is it sort of just like whatever's interesting to you and it's just the way the cookie crumbles?
It used to be what was interesting to me. As the company has gotten bigger, it's not just me. It's not called Craig Nobile Productions for a reason. I really hope we're building a culture within the team that like it is a space that we can all stand behind this brand of Seaview and feel that we are meaningfully contributing to it. I think one thing we've gotten really interested in the last couple of years is like understanding like who the Seaview buyer is. And, you know, through a lot of work that we're doing in data research right now, we've actually identified that there's over 2,000 people who have seen 3 or more of our shows in the last season. For us, that's just a really interesting fact. And I'm like, who are those people? And can we have dinner with all of them? And what do they want? And what do they want to see? And can we get to the point where effectively we start to build shows for an audience that we know how to talk to? And there are going to be shows that I might love or someone in the office may love, but it's just not someone that it's not an audience that we know how to find. And what we're working on right now is how to get really smart about being the people who know how to speak to our audience the best. And then we can be in service of the artists and the investors and everyone who comes around to make the show happen.
Who is your audience?
They're very New York. They're younger. They see a lot of theater. They're culture seekers. We spend a lot of time pulling demographics of our audiences versus the Broadway demographic. And there is a notable difference on most of our shows. Now, there are exceptions, right? Like Parade was a really sort of down the middle, very traditional Broadway audience. It had a tourist audience. It fit the mold sort of exactly. But shows like Just for Us or Mike Birbiglia's Old Man in the Pool and Slave Play and Romeo, all live in this sort of interesting bubble of actually, if you were interested in one of those, you were probably interested in one of those other ones, and trying to figure out how to speak to people as a production company, which is not, audiences usually aren't spoken to by the production company, has been something we've gotten really excited about.
Is there any world in which we could have like a Broadway subscription or like any sort of collective something, just because it feels like the industry is so incredibly siloed to me. It feels like every sort of company is out for itself. And I'm wondering, even within your own productions, is there any world in which you would really brand it as like, it is a Seaview production? If you see this, you could get a discount on another, or like, are there worlds in which...
There's totally a world. Yeah. We're excited about that. And actually, I think there's so much to learn from what the nonprofits have done over the last many decades in terms of memberships and subscriptions and seasons and
recurring.
And so we've been like really investigating that. We've been really inspired by the work that Neon and A24 have done in the film industry and starting to pull inspiration from all sorts of places like that. There's all sorts of complexities with selling tickets across shows because it's different theater owner chains, mean different ticketing platforms, mean different technology and different whatever. So trying to make them all sort of talk to each other is a bit of a thing to untangle. But, we're really interested in just like how to make the theater going experience better, like sidewalk to sidewalk for audiences. From the moment that you're like, I want to go see that thing, to the moment you leave, like how have we made that a smoother experience? And so we're constantly thinking about like cross-promoting shows and cross-promoting ticket things. And so interested in it.
What time do you wake up?
Pretty early. So 6:37.
Do you use sleep?
Yeah, enough.
What does your day-to-day look like?
My favorite thing about this job is there's genuinely no one way that it looks. It's jumping from project to project, and we could be touching 10 projects in a day, or it could be the creative team for Queen of Versailles coming to New York in 2 weeks, and that whole week is Queen of Versailles time. So sometimes we're deep in process, sometimes we're in heavy development and touching lots of things, sometimes we're in previews on a show or in tech on a show. We're sort of in that building, and every single day, every single week just looks different, which is the most exciting part of it to me.
How do you prioritize? Not even just with the myriad projects that you have, but also like I'm talking to clients, I'm in marketing meetings, I'm dealing with my team and inspiring them and telling them, go do research on Neon or audience databases. Like how on earth do you delegate your time?
Really genuinely, I know I keep saying it, but we genuinely have an amazing team. And we have sort of show captains within the team and people who run point on projects. And, it is really about delegating and sharing the workload. And for me, I love producing. I love being like in the weeds of the thing. But as the company gets bigger, I do need to zoom out a bit. And I stay a little bit more focused on the bigger picture and the season planning and the strategic moves of the company, while we have like extraordinary producers who are, in every single meeting. And, for us, we thrive as a business if we have repeat business with our artists. And our artists are the most important stakeholder in the business. And if they don't choose to work with us, we don't have a business. For us, it is about like, how do we make ourselves, and every artist is different in how they want to work with a commercial producing office. Sometimes they want us in every conversation. Sometimes they want to see us at opening night and never again. And so it's learning about, what is the way in with any particular artist. And if they want us there, that we are super present for everything. So it's figuring out the balance of how to be super present, but also how to stay big picture on a lot of things.
Pandemic notwithstanding, and perhaps Lempicka notwithstanding, what is your average lead time from, I have this idea, I want these stars, I want to do this project, to opening night?
It really varies. Sometimes things come together literally overnight, and we have gotten quite good at being nimble and sprinting at something. And, there are opportunities like Oscar Isaac and Rachel Brosnahan were doing this extraordinary revival of the Sign and Sidney Brustein's Window at BAM. A theater became available last minute, and we mobilized, and we got that show on sale in like a few weeks.
Insane.
That's not how we prefer to do things. And then typically it's a year or two for an idea to gestate and the team to come together. And particularly if you're working with fancy people with busy schedules.
I was going to say, like, were you talking to Rachel and Kit like 2 years ago?
That was actually pretty quick as well. Yeah, that was sort of within a year.
That's amazing.
Time frame, which is fun because it's like we have some big projects like the Queen of Versailles musical, which has been many years in the making and scheduled within an inch of its life. And then there's a bunch of things that we have I don't even know what else we're going to have next year.
Yeah, me neither.
These things are going to just pop up, right? And I think
guess
that's kind of the fun. They do.
Are you finding that now stars are coming to you as like, they know to go to you if they want a vehicle, like a Broadway vehicle?
In some ways, yeah. Look, what we do in the star-driven play space is not proprietary and singular.
Of course
there's lots of great folks who do what we do, and there's plenty of work to go around too. Yeah. So
and plenty of stars.
We love when the phone rings. We also love chasing people. If we have a dream of somebody we want to get on stage, we're happy to harass them until
they say yes.
Come home. Yeah.
How do you have a Rolodex of agent names, or do you just like?
We have great agency partners. Sometimes it's managers, sometimes it's publicists, sometimes it's direct to the star, sometimes it's we worked with someone who's friends with so and so, and we know they're going to have dinner, and can you get them this thing and whatever. It's sort of any number of weird ways, but we mostly go after people who we know want to get on stage. It's a big jump if you don't want to get on stage.
How do you know who wants to get on stage?
They're usually pretty communicative about it. Sometimes they say it in the press, which is always fun.
Yeah.
Then you can call and say, your client said this. And they're like, no, they don't actually want to do that. I'm like, yeah, they did.
But they said that.
They said it.
We have a video.
Yeah, exactly.
Love. What's next?
What is next? The Queen of Versailles musical.
Yay.
Will open in this summer, as I mentioned. And genuinely, the rest of the season is a bit of a question mark. There's like tons of things floating. There's a bunch of great projects that need to land, but nothing sort of yet.
How do you balance pursuing new work with what you're currently managing?
It's the sort of age-old question.
Yeah.
It's like and my job is a little bit about like, where's the fire today?
Yes.
And how do we put it out? And,
totally.
But again, within the team, there are folks who focus on the day-to-day, and then there are folks who are out reading, because we get so much inbound stuff. We go searching for things. We commission work, travel all over and go and see things in different cities and different countries. So it is both like the inbound and the outbound, like work happening today and work for the future. And some of that is really long lead, like we're talking about. And some stuff, it's like, actually, we have room for one more play next season. What's that play going to be? Let's go find something that's ready to go.
For a young producer or an aspiring producer, like what in the 2024-2025 landscape, what advice do you offer them?
Run. I'm kidding. It's great. It's so fun. It's so fun. It feels cliche, but I think what the most important thing is to just start making work anywhere. I mean, the amazing thing about this city and the business is you can get a degree if you like a degree. You don't need a degree, and you don't need permission to go make art. And I think it's so much about finding your community. The artists that we're working with now are mostly artists I've been working with since the beginning of my career, 11 years ago. And we all grow up together. And I think it's so important to find, your people and hang on to artists that you love and believe in. And if that means you're making a show in a black box and you're going to invite these producers and these agents and whatever, and it's going to cost a couple $100, you're going to crowdfund or whatever, like that's meaningful work. And I think sitting and waiting for the phone to ring is never a useful way to make it in this business. And nobody is going to give you permission, and nobody is going to drop an opportunity in your lap. And we're in the best city in the world for doing that. But you just actually need to start somewhere. Just make stuff you believe in.
How do you avoid burnout?
I'll let you know at the end of the season if we avoid burnout.
Yep.
I haven't totally figured out the life-work balance.
Yeah.
Because life is work and work is life. And
which is not balanced. That's not really balanced.
Another amazing thing about this job is, the community is so our family.
Yeah.
A work event becomes a social event, becomes a family event, like all in one. And I find that both really useful in terms of like it's enjoyable work because of the people that we choose to do it with and with our chosen families. And also it's hard because we're always on. Yeah. And so finding, I'm really fortunate that I have family out in Connecticut, and I go and I get to play with two nephews who really don't care about Broadway.
Thank God.
We went to a monster truck rally last week, and we saw the Gravedigger truck, which was very exciting. And they don't care about Tony Awards or shows or star schedules or theater availability,
touch grass,
which is great. And I feel really lucky to have great family.
Lempicka took 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Queen of Versailles.
10 years for us, longer for the authors.
Queen of Versailles has been how long?
6 or 8 year journey, like 6.
Feels like new musicals are 10-ish,
Yep.
generally. Is that a hindrance in today's market or in general? And is there a solution?
I don't know that there's a solution. We like to think that there's a better way to make these musicals happen faster.
Who's we?
Or
is that just like sort of...
No, like the team. Like we talk a lot at Seaview about like how can we make these processes less laborious and cumbersome. And also it takes that much time for some good reason. And these things just need to gestate and work through, and artists need to make a thing and really believe in it, then step away and come back and actually be like, that was all wrong. Like, let's try this. Yeah. So some of it just is the time that it takes to do it. And also we could be more efficient. It comes down to resource and how we compensate people and how artists can afford to work on a show. And it's usually about jumping from commission to commission or development step to development step where artists can get paid, and it's hard to find those opportunities. We don't have any big idea on how to make it faster. You know, when someone's like, it's been 10 years, my musical's finally happening. I'm like, that's right. You're right on track. You're right on track. You're right where you're supposed to be.
Yep. What's something that you haven't gotten to do yet that you really want to do?
I don't know that there's an audience for this anymore. And the closest thing we have is this fabulous revival, Once Upon a Mattress, that we're doing this on Foster right now. Again, back to the Goodspeed Opera House. I came up on these old school musicals. I would love to do like a happy, clappy, tap dancey 42nd Street or Crazy for You, or like just a big old fashioned musical. I mean, I loved that. The Jerry Zach's revival of Hello Dolly a couple years ago, which is just like where people, you know, you just saw people.
It was church
floating out.
Oh, I wept, and I saw it 4 times. I saw all 3 of them, and oh god, it was amazing.
So that's on my bucket list.
Did you see Crazy for You in London?
Yeah, I loved it.
I did too. I think Charlie Stemp is just incredible. A magical human.
Susan Stroman can do no wrong.
Dream show you'd like to produce? Crazy for You, 42nd Street, those vibes. Tap shows specifically?
I just love tap.
I do too.
So fun.
Do you tap?
Nope.
I'll take a class with you.
Fun.
I really would.
Sign me up.
Favorite musical of all time?
I mean, we literally just talked about it, and we now talked about it 4 times, but really 42nd Street to me is like a perfect musical. And it was also the revival cast album was just like on all the time in my house.
Did you see it?
And it's, loved. It's like shows about showbiz.
I know. I'm such a sucker for it. I'm a speck of dust in your Broadway show. Yeah. It's so good.
So good.
Yeah. I remember Shadow Waltz was happening, and I sat my mom and I rushed, and I was itty bitty, 8 or 9 maybe. And I remember looking up, and one of the girls winked at me, and I was just like, oh my God, this is the best thing I've ever seen in my life.
So good.
Yeah. Memories. Most challenge. I can't ask that one. I mean, I could try. We'll see how diplomatic you'll be. Most challenging moment as a producer. It can be a vague thing of like when this happens, but you can also just be like, next.
That moment that happens on almost every show where you're like, is this the thing I'm supposed to be making? Are we all making that? Hey, are we making the same thing? Are we going to actually be able to make this thing?
You're captain.
Can we get the building? Can we get the money? Is it all going to align? Or have I spent years on this thing for no? Like, there's always, no matter how sort of surefire something is or how risky it is, there's always that one moment where I'm like, I don't know.
There has to be. There's so many variables. It's literally a miracle anything happens.
Correct.
Yeah.
I say that when we circle up at the beginning of rehearsals. I say every single time, it is a miracle that we're even here. The fact that we got here, and if we don't get a day more than this, like how lucky we were to be here. Yeah.
100%. Best advice you've received, or a great piece of advice?
Okay, so there's a guy called Fred DeLuca who founded Subway Sandwiches, which was like a Connecticut thing. He uses the term shoot first, aim later, which is like a gun reference, which makes it slightly uncomfortable. But it could be not a gun.
Yeah, sure.
But this idea where just do it.
Yeah.
How do we get to it's like you'll figure out the direction later, but like just go.
Do
and
the
I think
thing
about it all the time. Just get it out.
Biggest risk that paid off?
Slave Play.
Current show you wish you were producing?
Oh, Mary.
Next thing you're really excited about?
George Clooney's Broadway debut and Good Night and Good Luck.
Love it. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks. This was so fun.
Awesome.
You rock.
You're a star. Go see a Seaview show.
Come see a Seaview
Romeo and Juliet. What else? Go see a Seaview show.
Come see a Seaview show.
Be a producer. It's not so bad. The water's fine. Come on in.
Come on in.
Thank you so much for watching. If you want to follow Greg.
Just Greg Noble. Everything's Greg Noble.
At Greg Noble. Great. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time on Game Changers.
Thanks to our incredible guests for sharing their time and wisdom with us, to Tao Group and our gorgeous venue, The Highlight Room in New York City, and to you for joining us at And That's Showbiz. We have a lot more where this came from, so don't forget to subscribe, let us know what you thought, and what guests you want to see next in the comments, and we'll see you in the next one.